Okay,
Please send it out to watch on YouTube.
okay. So good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Again, Friday, February 6, 2025 at 1:45 in the afternoon. So now we're back again. We're going to hear from the Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation. We have Frank Coffey with us. Frank, it's been a while.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for coming up and joining us this afternoon. We're interested to hear what's happening in Burlington,
Great.
or Greater Burlington area.
How much time do I have? What's
You have 45 minutes.
Okay, good. I'll try to leave a lot of time for back and forth. My name is Frank Coffey, and I run the Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation. We go by GBAC. So we're first of all, thank you all for your service to Vermont. Mr. Chairman, you've been doing this a long time, and thank you. It means a lot to have citizens take time out of their life to serve us, and that's not lost on any of us. Herb, your new life here again. You're back. We worked together when he was working here.
Be acquainted.
Yeah.
That's life.
And I started out in this building as a junior at UVM, working in the legislative council. I think I was one of the first university or college students that gave up a semester to come and be staff for the legislative council. It was really cool. And I was assigned to Mike Obohosky when he was a freshman legislator. So that goes back a ways. And to Joel Charrington, who was the head of the legislative council at the time. So Bill Russell was still there, and Ed Miller were working in the legislative council. And we were downstairs where Senate Economic Development was, in that whole area in the lounge. That was the legislative council. Anyway, it was fun, interesting, and really rewarding to my life. So GBIC is one of the state's 12 nonprofit regional economic development corporations. And we've been around since the early 1950s. The oldest economic development corporation in Vermont is Rutland County. And then Brattleboro and Burlington, which is GBIC, came about in 1950. The state was losing all of its textile mills at that time. And municipal leaders and community leaders around the state wanted to recruit manufacturing into Vermont. So they created regional economic development corporations. And then fast forward to Governor Salmon's time, he started trying to align the regional development corporations with the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then Governor Snelling basically rounded out the regions. Governor Snelling had a really strong focus on land use planning and economic development and aligning the two. In fact, in the governor's office, he had Jeff Carr as a 22-year-old economist, and he had land use planners in there as well. And he rounded out the creation of 12 regional planning commissions and 12 regional development corporations. So we still have that structure today, and that's all thanks to Snelling completing that. I had the opportunity to work with him. I ran Franklin County Industrial Development Corporation. I'm from St. Albans originally, and still have a home there. I live in South Burlington now. I'll get to that. But so they rounded out having 12 RDCs and 12 RPCs. The RPCs were to help municipalities initially with land use planning, developing town plans, land use plans, zoning. And then they gradually morphed into helping the municipalities with transportation planning. And they are probably the regional development corporation's closest partner. So when there are people that represent business interests here. We're not chambers of commerce. We are economic development organizations. It just so happens in Burlington, we're co-located with the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce. We wish the Regional Planning Commission would be in our building as well. We bought an old armory in downtown Burlington and restored it. And the ground level of our building is a economic development nonprofit Center, where we provide office space for the Small Business Development Center, for the Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center, and to SCORE. And then whatever, Alex is one of my colleagues, what's
Apex.
PTEC? Apex. They're out of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and they help Vermont companies and Vermonters get information about federal and state contracts. So none of these entities could pay rent. So we want their resources in Burlington. So we forgo about $30,000 a year in rental income to provide office space for these folks and meeting space. Because we're a nonprofit, we think it's core to our mission to do that. Vita is also located in our building. They have a small office in our building where they serve Northwest Vermont from there. I've been doing this a long time. I started in the early 80s with running Franklin County Industrial Development. Then I left there to work in my family's real estate business, and then was completely bored doing that. And Governor Dean and I were friends, and I ended up coming to work for Governor Dean for 3 years as one of his commissioners of economic development, and worked with Emma's dad, Bill Schuldeis, and a whole great bunch of folks there. David Bradbury, who runs the Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies. I helped start that initiative with Dr. Evans, who was the dean of the med school, and with Fred Hackett, another good old Vermonter. And David was my deputy when I walked into the economic development department. I didn't know him at the time. And it was interesting. We've been aligned in entrepreneurship since then. So our focus in economic development is we're focusing on dollar importing goods and services employers. So if you make a product or add value to the product, or if you perform a service and add value to that service, take the product or service and sell it outside Vermont and bring the first dollar into Vermont, then you're a key employer for us. So Chittenden County has 8,000 employers that employ about 115,000 Vermonters. They're not all from Chittenden County, they're from other counties as well. We are micro-focused on about 300 employers that employ about 40,000 of those 115,000, because they tend to be the ones that form the economic base of the region. When I started doing this 30 years ago, 26% of the state's workforce was in manufacturing. We were heavily recruiting manufacturers to come here from other places. Today, there's about 10% of the state's workforce in manufacturing. And I'm proud to say that a lot of those are Vermont-grown companies. So we're likely not to get multinationals coming here into Vermont anymore. The way you manufacture today in the world has changed. So if you have one manufacturing site in North America, that's probably what you have, and like distribution centers all over. But we've been fortunate to attract companies like IBM that became Global Foundries, and they have stayed here because of workforce and talent. And it's really important that we have entities like that. So I did want to touch on a few things and that are core to our job, and a couple of things that are passion projects. And let me do the passion to get them gone, and then we'll go into the nuts and bolts. My daughter passed away almost 10 years ago from opiate addiction, and I adopted her little boy, who was 2 then, and he's 11 today, and he's autistic. And he's verbal, he's not conversational. So I never expected to be a dad again, approaching 60. And it is the coolest thing ever. And it is the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's the most joyful pursuit ever. So I've learned a lot about special ed and just the amazing work that teachers do in Vermont. and for our children. GBAC had always been pro pre-K, and no matter how much it cost, we thought because of Vermont's poverty, that was an economic leveler. So we always supported full-time pre-K in Vermont. We only have 10 hours. Hopefully we'll get to more. But Alex, one of my colleagues, Alex and Veronica are here. We formed a group. I started thinking, what happens to Frankie when he's 22 and becomes permanently disabled? Where does he go? Where does he live? I've got enough challenges with his IEP, individual education plan, but I got to think about this. Time is not my friend, and we've got to come up with something. So we formed a great group in our office with a lot of UVM interns, and we started looking at housing opportunities for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we're in our second year of it now. Matt Coda helps us with economic development work here in the State House, and Patty Comline and Becky Lewandowski are helping us with this group of amazing moms, mostly moms, of adult children with ID and DD, called the Developmental Disabilities Housing Initiative. So we're working hand in hand with them and supporting them. And last year, thank you very much, you provided funds in VHIP so that they could add housing options for those with ID and DD. So we continue on this year. There's a pilot project that I think is in the budget this year. Champlain Housing Trust is one of our partners that we're working with. Michael Monty is amazing. He also has an autistic son as well. So they're doing one pilot, and then we worked with the amazing woman that started a Camp Hill Communities project called Heartbeat in Hardwick. And if you haven't been there, it's the coolest place. I went to Camp Hill in Pennsylvania to see 4 sites there. So I went to look at 2 schools and 2 adult living communities, and they're kind of like a cross between a hippie commune and a kibbutz. If you kind of look at them, they're so incredible, and there's always an agricultural component to what they're doing to grow vegetables, and then just be in nature as well. So we came back here and we're looking at different models. So what we want to advance is a rural model, like a suburban model, and an urban model. And we're just in year 2 of it. So you'll hear more about it from the experts that we have working in this area. But I wanted to say thank you, legislators, for listening and helping this group of Vermonters. There's about 600 Vermonters today that are looking for homes that are intellectually and developmentally disabled. So this is a passion project of GBIC, not core to what we do, but it's our way to give back to our community and to the state of Vermont. The second area is career technical education. And I have chaired the state workforce board 3 times over the past 30 years. One, and you'll know this, Mr. Chairman, when I worked with Bill Childace, and it was called the Human Resources Investment Council. So I chaired that. I didn't want to. I got stuck with it by my old boss, Governor Dean, and then carried on for Governor Douglas for a bit. And then Governor Shumlin came back and said he wanted me to chair the Workforce Development Council. So I did that for a bit and then got stuck there in the process of transferring over to WIOA, which was the federal platform. So I did that with Governor Scott for his first year as well, and then asked to have someone else be the chair. I would continue on. During that, in working economic development, we focused a lot on education. So the first area we looked at was pre-K, and the Business Roundtable was anchoring that. And then we looked at college and university. So we started working with all the presidents of our institutions and the chancellor of our state colleges at the time to focus on internships to get, or co-ops to get our college students that were attending here to meet Vermont employers. So they get that introduction now. So hopefully we retain some of them as Vermonters when they graduate. I think every one of our institutions of higher ed is doing really well in that regard. I'm a UVM trustee still, and I know UVM is doing a great job. Vermont State University is doing a great job. Champlain College is doing a great job. Norwich, Middlebury. We've got a really good network. The CCV infrastructure is incredible. So that's really important. Then we wheeled into high school. And we would have gone into middle school if we could have, because I started looking at my kids and what they were getting and what they weren't getting. So we started focusing on career technical education. And about 12 years ago, I said to one of my colleagues, I'll bet half of the students that go to high school go on to nothing when they graduate. What are we going to do? Because they're the ones that stay here. And we need to provide them with curriculum that's meaningful enough to let them have enough skills so they can earn a meaningful wage to take care of themselves and hopefully a family. So we've been advocating for changes initially in governance and structure of the career technical education centers. I understand education is one of the things you're looking at, and that might be part of the continuum, but I can tell you that that number, 50%, was validated by VSAC and Vermont State University, state colleges at the time. So if you translate it down to numbers, so say we're graduating 5,000 from high school in Vermont, and half of them are going on to nothing or they drop out in 3 semesters, that's 2,500. So I know from having a child with autism that 400 of them or maybe 500 have special needs. And I know from having a daughter who was addicted to opiates that another 500 or more are addicted to something else. And then I've also paid attention as well to boys, and they start falling off in 5th grade. And we've got to do something different with curriculum. And I'm at the point in my life where I don't care who owns it. I don't care if it's the CTEs, the high schools, Vermont State University. We've got to make the curriculum choices available starting in the 9th grade, starting in middle school, if you could. Because right now, to attend CTE full-time, you have to be a junior or a senior. I don't know. I know a lot of seniors, and I don't know many that even go to more than one class their second semester of their senior year. So for Vermont, I couldn't think of a better payoff to add qualified people to our workforce than to give them the skills that they need in high school. And you and I grew up in that environment. All the high schools had VOC programs. We need to refocus on that. And I realize money is a real problem, right? And we're not growing population. Those are the challenges you're all dealing with. So I don't know how you get there. I know in partnership, since having a child with special needs, I work more with teachers and those who work in the education system to know how incredible our teachers are in this state and how much they have to do that is really not core to what they're doing, what they're sent there to do, but they end up having to do it. So as you look at CTE, the Vermont Business Roundtable is going to lead a 2-year initiative to see how they can help add value to this subject. But please keep that in mind as you move forward. I'll just get to a couple of things that are core to what we do. Industrial land. A couple of years ago, the governor proposed the Rural Industrial Development Program, RIDIP, and I can tell you that was really helpful. If there's any way to recapitalize that, it would be good to think about doing that. I've been at this game long enough to know that when I look at industrial parks, they basically, from the school I came from, they're land banks for manufacturing uses. And when we own them, when regional development corporations own them, we're not the private sector. We have to buy them, infrastructure them, and then hold them for the highest value added user. And the last one we did was 1983 in Chittenden County. And I still have 2 lots left with almost 30 lots in the park. We could have sold that entire park out in 2 years. We didn't because we were focused on job creation in the park. So I can tell you in Chittenden County, in Franklin County, we're down to probably 22, around 22 infrastructured industrial lots. That's trouble. So I represent Chittenden County, but I can tell you the economy doesn't know political or geographic boundaries. So when I look at the economy, I look at 50 miles from I'm a Vermonter, look at 50 miles from Burlington. So it's a little bit of Lamoille, it's all at Chittenden, a little bit of Lamoille, Grand Isle, most of Franklin, some of Washington, some of Addison. That's where the Northwest Vermont economy is. We'll probably in April, we'll submit to you a study. We've had Art Wolf do a profile of the Northwestern Vermont economy so you can see what it does for Vermont. He's in his 6th year of doing this. And so we have multiple versions of it before, but it's an interesting economic analysis. So I can tell you we need more industrial land. And the way at the cost of land today and the cost of permitting and the cost of infrastructure, this has got to be a statewide priority because the regions don't have the ability, we don't have the ability or the money to go and buy tracts of land, take it through the permit process, infrastructure it, and sit and wait for the highest value use. So when you're planning Vermont's future, think of this, think of industrial land. Housing, you know what the issues are in Vermont. So I don't have to tell you, you're cued into your constituents who live here. Now you're representing us. We need a lot more housing. And in order to do that, you know, as someone who's spent their life in economic development and real estate, we're kind of like back in the 1940s and 50s in terms of the way we have to look at building infrastructure. For a long time, houses out in the country just happened on lots. Act 250 came in and did great service to Vermont. It established protections that we needed. It defined a process that was needed for definition. And then our municipalities were, you know, every county had like a county seat or a few, right? And there was infrastructure in those areas. And then when infrastructure started expanding in the 40s, 50s, and 60s with housing developments, a lot of the time the municipalities would put in the roads, the water, the sewer. We didn't have sidewalks at the time, but then eventually we did. The old cities and village centers had sidewalks. And then somewhere in the in the 70s and 80s, we flipped from a municipal standpoint. I served 6 years as a member of the Board of Select Persons in St. Albans Town, so I know it from that side too, where we didn't even have a town manager at the time. We said to the developers, you build the water sewer, you build the roads, we'll take the road back in a year. And then it changed to, we need A76 standards for our roads, so we're going to take them back in 3 years. Now you got to pay a capital fee to get in, and now you got to pay a connection fee, but you build. So the pandemic hits and the demographic issues hit in areas like Vermont, where we're not growing population, and land costs go up, infrastructure costs go up, labor costs go up, And now when you see most housing developers that want to take on projects have to build so many units that they can't afford to pay for the infrastructure going in. So we need to think about it creatively. When I worked for Governor Dean, we're the people that Bill Schuldeis, myself, Bill Sorrell, Peter Giuliani, a longtime legislator from Montpelier's son, Paul Giuliani, wrote the first TIF. We wrote the first TIF legislation. And I really believe in the power of TIFs. I watched Act 60 come around as a select board member. You know, when we had all the property taxes ourselves, we could do property tax stabilization, we could bond, and it changed. And it is what it is. It is what it is now. But the TIF structure is something I really like and support the governor's Spark initiative. I think so we've worked with some of the biggest TIFs. Winooski was myself and about 8 other people that came up. And what we proved to the state was that you can't debt service that kind of infrastructure in 10 years. I think you were around at that time. And you couldn't debt service it. Like you couldn't pay off the debt in 10 years. You needed 20 years or 30 years in order to do it. But Winooski showed us you could do a TIF and you could build something in an area that had essential infrastructure and you could really build it out. And that worked. So what the governor's new program does is it allows rural communities also to play in building infrastructure capacity if they want to. So it does it at a more sustainable way, in a smaller way. And a TIF is a TIF. A TIF is take a white piece of paper, draw a little blue line around, and inside that circle is a TIF. It's pretty simple to understand how they work. But we're at the point in time where I think municipalities need the assistance to build the infrastructure capacity. And, you put your mark on how and where you want housing to be. Your municipalities that you represent do the same thing. They say, we want development here. Great. Governor says 30 to 40,000 homes. I know so many people and their children that I don't even think they have a dream of home ownership at this point because of the cost. So we really have to figure out a way to take housing on at all types of housing at all different levels. So I just lost both my parents in the past 3 years, and their end of life choice was to live at home in a small ranch house that they built with a nursing room, right? And nothing elaborate, but they died at home, and they were able to do that. They spent the last few weeks of their life in and out of the hospital, but so we need a lot of senior housing, maybe smaller, and we need workforce housing for young Vermonters. We need housing at pretty much all levels. The upper level will always find a way to get housing, and the market will be able to build them housing. But housing is really, really important. So I've talked enough. I'll be quiet and happy to answer any questions if you have any. Did I leave anything out? Okay.
Jennifer Frank?
Just have a comment, which is, for your first passion project, you were discussing housing for people with little disabilities. I just want to, underscore how impressive and passionate that group of parents are. It's a really impressive group. I mean,
They're terrified. We're all terrified. What's going to happen to our children?
they've done from my perspective, they've done a very good job of advocating and stating the need. And so anyway, thank you for being part of that.
Thank you all for listening to them and helping. And it's increment, we're not going to solve it overnight. But we will as a community. Each community will do their own way. But thank you. Appreciate that.
So thanks very much for coming in and being into your acquaintance. And I thought you did a really good job. I think it's very important to understand, where we've been and the different changes that Vermont's economy has faced, over the years, and it continues. It just keeps changing. Right? And what are the current challenges now? And I think you identified some of the real major issues around economic development in our region. Focusing on some of the infrastructure you talked about. The point you made about Northwest Vermont, I can resonate. That resonates with me. I'm in a little tiny little rural corner of Addison County, but the reality is that most of our folks, go up to, Greater Burlington, to work. Not all, that's really the economic engine for a huge area beyond just Chittenden County. So that's really important. What you said about housing, I think also really, really resonates, especially in my little community. And I think you pointed to at least one need, maybe more, around infrastructure. And that's more and more challenging, I think, for smaller rural communities. They need some help. They really need some help to get housing. I can't tell you how desperate, people are for housing. In my community, to losing residents, we're actually declining really in terms of our housing base. We had so they need some help, whether it's a TIF type program, whether it's some other program. It's just really, really needed. And I appreciate, putting that out there that these smaller municipalities really do need some help. So I appreciate that.
Thanks. It's good. Thank you for starting a second life in this room in a different way. That had to be really interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Just more comment or than anything, but going back to your passion project, I don't know if have you worked at all with Champlain Community Services at all?
Yeah, we work with SD Associates and Champlain and Howard Center. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing, something that I learned, I'm just wondering what this program is, because I think this could really solve some of these issues. Is I worked with a client of mine who was living in an apartment. He was not ID or DD, but his roommate was. And they had this arrangement where I think they shared the cost of living in the house. But obviously, but he was there as being able to make sure that nothing bad happened, that, place was properly cleaned and meals were cooked without burning the house down and things like that. I don't know the name of the program.
So we have a shared living provider program that Vermont piloted right after we closed Brandon, and it's awesome. Like, it's families become the family of those with special needs. And it has been a wonderful program. In my little boy's case, because he's autistic, change of any kind is not good. So we're trying to build homes that become their homes forever. And the people can change that come in, but the place doesn't change. And that some of the other parents want to be in like apartment houses and where there's community around. In rural communities, like we started Riverflow in Moncton, and Moncton is just a wonderful, cute little rural community and in just on the edge of Chittenden and Addison County. And so we're in a rural setting with that. So I see rural, suburban, and urban settings working. And there's so many good folks in the Agency of Human Services that know much more than I do. You know, we're partnering with them as well. Howard Center uh, is one of the anchors in our area.
Can you expand a little more on the demand for industrial space? And what is the last,
Yeah,
in county, you said in the eighties was the last one was built out?
yeah, it was. Well,
What,
why? Why did that happen? Well,
or where,
we
which?
used to subsidize, as a state, we provided money that went through VITA, and then our congressional delegation would go after whatever the grant of the day was for infrastructure to help the municipalities. So the municipality would identify where they wanted an industrial park to be. And then they'd turn to the Regional Development Corporation and say, you buy that land and we'll get the infrastructure to it. And they'd co-develop it in partnership. And that's almost how VITA was started. Initially was to help to bring a lot of the money into helping the Regional Development Corporation set up industrial parks. So the costs were much different at the time. I'll give you for instance, we started to veer away from that path as a state in around 1984. And why I picked that date was GBIC could have bought the Catamount land in Milton that year. And then we were presented the opportunity to buy all of the land at Exit 12, where Walmart and Home Depot is, and we didn't have $400,000. So stop and think. In Snelling's world, industrial development was supposed to be near interstate interchanges or highway interchanges. He was right. But we couldn't, today that would be an industrial park, not retailville. But it is what it is. So we didn't keep pace. Franklin County stayed really focused on industrial development, and they still have, I think, 8 lots in the St. Albans Town Industrial Park. I think there might be a lot in Enosburg, in Swanton, there's a lot. So what will we do with 22 lots left in Chittenden County? We'll move employers to Franklin County. We'll move them anywhere where there's capacity. We don't want to lose. So the economic development team, how we recruit both new companies and expansions is we sell Vermont. Like we work with the Agency of Commerce, we work with who's ever governor and their secretaries of commerce, their commissioner of economic development. We sell Vermont. When the prospect tells you where they want to be, then we close the deal at the local level. But we work as a team. So that's what we'll end up doing. We need to build that capacity. In our region, we have the Global Foundries campus, which basically is a city of industry. It has the biggest wastewater facility in the state of Vermont. Right there. There's more electric power. They use more electric power than the city of Burlington does at that site. So that presents opportunities for redevelopment, parts of it. And there might be a couple lots left on the Husky campus in Milton that have the infrastructure. So, but when I look at other areas, there really aren't. Like, if you want to put 100,000 square foot building up, you need a lot that's 20 acres probably for parking and stormwater and, so we really need to be thoughtful about this in planning. And I know our peers in the regional planning commissions are looking at this pretty carefully because it's our job to look out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Which is a good thing because we're nonprofit too. We can do that. Sorry, I went on a little long on that.
That was helpful.
Questions for Frank? Frank, it may not be in your bailiwick, but we've been hearing a lot from the Captive Association, the need for convention space
Mhm.
in the county. And is that anything that you're hearing about
Yes, I didn't expect that, a question. But no, it's a good one.
Coming up this.
Well, I'm a university trustee, so, and doing this job and working in state government and doing this job over 35 years, I can tell you, I don't know how many studies I've been on to look at where you could put a convention center in Vermont. What I can tell you is we have approved and started a project at UVM that's in between Gutterson Fieldhouse, the hockey rink, and Patrick Gymnasium that already has $20 million invested in it. It received permits, and our last UVM president paused that project. And I was not one of his favorite trustees. And I'm glad he's gone. That we need that project, and that project may need some state help. So that project would serve as a convention center. It's big enough. I think it's like 4,000 seats, and you can open it up. So we've already invested $22 million in it. There's $4 million worth of fabricated steel sitting in a field next to the Aiken Research Center on Spear Street in South Burlington. Go by there sometime. It irks me every time I drive by there about once a day. And Richard Tarrant has committed $15 million to the project, and we have other donors that committed another 16 million. So I think we need like $60 million to complete the project. And the students are going to pay for whatever a $250 student fee equates to over a 30-year period, whatever that'll debt service over a 30-year period. So I would finish that if we could. And like you'll have legislative trustees that'll probably talk with you about this. We're searching for a new president now at UVM. But in my world, you don't start a project. You don't work for 20 years on it. Get buy-in by the university community, the local community, and then commence construction on it and stop it. Like government wouldn't do that either, right? You wouldn't, for the most part, you wouldn't be elected if you did. So we need a way to figure out how to finish that. That would serve really well. And at the cost right now, it'd probably be the most economical choice to do as well. Plus, it's tied into the university, which is our university. So,
That in mind, one of my members is a trustee.
yes, I know. Yeah, I serve with money. Yeah,
Have some conversations. with
yeah.
Right. Thank you for
All
coming.
right, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Conversation.
Yeah, if we can help in any way, Mr. Chairman, let us know. Matt is here, and we are not far. All right, have a great weekend. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Just step out.